Tom and Jerry is the latest film to be based off of characters that you loved as a kid, be placed in New York. Already a bad sign if they go to New York, in case you haven't noticed, with, I'm sure there's others, but it's mostly that one. And of course, this being a Tom and Jerry movie, this movie is about a young girl played by Chloe Grace Moretz who basically cons her way into a job at a hotel, and Jerry is there, and now she has to take care of the problem, but Tom also happens to be there, so she brings in Tom, and there's going to be antics. But while they're having fights, they're also focusing on Chloe Grace Moretz trying to help this couple get married at the hotel, and Michael Pena being jealous of her success now, and yada yada. Tom and Jerry. I had mild curiosity in this movie after watching the trailer, because when I watched the trailer I was like, okay, a lot of red flags popping up here, but I do like that they're sticking with the Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Looney Tunes back in action kind of animation. I saw back in action, I think, first, before like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and I was a really big fan of that. I like seeing the cartoons interacting with the real people, so I'm glad that they kept that style for this. You know, Tom and Jerry were going to be silent. That's a plus. It looked like they had all the right ingredients to make a pretty solid Tom and Jerry movie, but then I saw parts of the trailer where they focused on people, and Michael Pena making jokes about Instabook face or Tiki-Tok. And that's when I got worried, because this is also directed by Tim Story, who previously has brought us that Shaft movie from like 2 years ago, the Fantastic Four movies, the Think Like a Man movies, Taxi with Jimmy Fallon. So I was still pretty worried going in. I know that he said that Warner Brothers kind of brought him in to talk about projects he might be interested in, and he was like really excited to talk about Tom and Jerry and what he would do to tackle that property. But even with that coming out, him saying how awesome it would be for him to be a part of this franchise, you know, it still didn't give me the best of hope because of these other movies he's made. I did look at the screenwriter. It's only one, and it's one of the co-writers for Brigsby Bear. If you've watched my channel for a while now, you remember I talked about that movie back in 2017. Really great, underrated gem. Not too many people saw that one, though. Hopefully more people do. It's a great movie. So when I saw that that guy was writing this, I was like, okay, maybe, just maybe, there's wiggle room for this to actually be entertaining and fun. But that's the thing about this movie too, is that it is based off of those old cartoons, and I grew up watching a lot of those because my dad was a big fan back then, so I got to watch a lot of them as a kid, you know. It works out. But it was really fun back then, and it was just about the simplicity of it. There's a lot more that went into those cartoons to make it work, but, you know, it's very simplistic. The cartoons are very short, and they try to put Tom and Jerry in movies. One that I literally watched last night too, the one where they talked, and it's like, man, this franchise as far as movies go, it's not like they have the greatest track record, you know, so it's not like this movie is like shitting on the legacy of the past Tom and Jerry stuff. There really is kind of room to actually do something fun with this one, you know, no matter what they did. No, even with the human side characters and main character with Chloe Grace Moretz, there's still room to do something good, right? No, this movie's bad. I don't want to exaggerate how much I dislike this movie, because I know there's a lot of people that really hated it, and I can understand why, don't get me wrong, but I just didn't have that feeling while watching this movie. There was plenty in it that I found enjoyable in the moment. Like, just seeing Tom and Jerry in general, you know, that's fun. You know, they have plenty of scenes where they do go at each other, and they do some classic Tom and Jerry kind of gags, like Jerry looking in his hand and Tom trying to, and he finally shows him, punches him in the face, you know. And there's at one point too where like he bumps into Spike, who I didn't know was going to be in this movie. He's voiced by Bobby Cannavale, and he does like the whole thing where he like tries to push like the little lump in his head back in, and it just pops up in another place. So I was like, this is fun. So basically, just there's aspects of this movie that are fun. All of them have to do with whenever it's just Tom and Jerry fighting each other, interacting with each other, and bringing in Spike occasionally. Because they really do have that animation down. For the most part, the animation looks really good. You know, the movements are all down. It has that, like, vibrant, chaotic energy whenever they move around and run. It's very good how they handle that. But unfortunately, this has human characters. Tom and Jerry are basically just narrative tools at this point. Even though the movie is named after them, it might as well not be. I was thinking, like, after watching this movie, like, all they really needed to do, they didn't need to change too much from this premise. They just needed to simplify the human characters a bit more. Maybe just have, like, one hotel manager you understand, quickly, like this job is important to him or her, and they're trying to make sure this wedding goes smoothly because it's a powerful, wealthy, elite couple. But then you beef up the roles of Tom and Jerry, so that's not the focus, because people know that we don't necessarily care about that. We care about how Tom and Jerry's gonna wreck it. You know, you can have like a small escalation of events, like they fight over here, fight here, manage to get to the hotel, they start causing bigger problems, and then like the climax is just them fucking up the whole thing. You know, something like that. It would take a lot of talent and a lot of like the right mindset, the right creative decisions on how to make it work. But they could have made something work out of this premise. Unfortunately, they didn't know how to do that, so they just beefed up the Chloe Grace Moretz role. Kind of. They throw her in the movie at the beginning. She's like walking down the street and she gets fired over like FaceTime. It's one of those like, imagine Chloe Grace Moretz is FaceTiming someone, but instead of it like actually being like someone else who's FaceTiming, it's like this video of me talking like on her phone, like just, hey, you're fired. And then after she gets fired, she immediately cons her way into the hotel job through some antics that probably wouldn't work. But because the hotel is run by that guy from Deadpool 2, and he's kind of a little dumb in this movie, you know, she kind of gets by. And then after that, a lot of the rest of the movie is not really focusing on her as a character. It's a lot of her interacting with Tom and Jerry with bad jokes. Unfortunately, she does not have a whole lot to work off of in this movie. I like Chloe Grace Moretz, I think she's a good actress, but unfortunately this movie just doesn't give her enough to work off of. At one point, near the third act of this movie, she finally says something that lets you in on like who she is as a character. But it's handled so quickly. Honestly, it feels like an afterthought. They were like, oh, you know what, this main character doesn't really have a whole lot of motivation. How can we tie her with the groom, Colin Jost, in the wedding subplot? In over their heads, so there you go. And then it's immediately discarded, you know, treated with no care. It's like, we just wanted to gain some sympathy points, so here's something real quick. And it's like, that's not really how this works. It's kind of hard to believe that this is someone's passion project. I don't want to say this is Tim Story's passion project, but the way he was talking about it made it seem like he was passionate about it. And it's hard to believe that someone who wrote Brigsby Bear also wrote this movie, because it feels so studio manipulated, so calculated. Miscalculations, obviously, but calculated in every single way. The movie opens with rapping pigeons, one of them voiced by Tim Story, and then they come in throughout the movie to recap what you've already seen for no reason. And it's like, why are these pigeons here? And it's whenever they show these pigeons and a couple other shots in this movie with visual effects where you kind of start to realize, you know, after a while, the visual effects don't look all that good. You know, like, I think Tom and Jerry are handled well pretty much throughout the movie. Like, I understand that it's not supposed to look completely real because they are literally 2D CG creations on screen. But, you know, at certain points it just doesn't even look good with some of these animals. As well as other moments in this movie that just feel calculated. Tom flosses at one point. He literally, like, they make sure to show it, like, oh yeah, he's doing the moves, he's flossing. Everything else about him is like, it feels normal, like Tom character, but then they throw in modern day, and this will appeal to kids. I don't know why they keep doing that though, because I feel like collectively everyone's kind of like, I feel like even kids, whenever they see someone floss in like a movie or TV show, they're kind of just like, oh, stop trying to do that. Like, no. I feel like the only thing that works, like, having the dad in Us dab, and then the kids are like, dude, what are you doing? You know, stuff like that works. But then you have stuff like this where they're like, no, this is like legit. Tom is flossing. This is awesome. And it's like, no, it's not. It's awful. The soundtrack in this movie is distractingly bad. Not really because it's songs that they bought the rights to put in the movie, because obviously that doesn't make a soundtrack inherently bad. We've seen that work before. It all depends on execution and the implementation into the plot, how it matches. You know, we've seen movies with great soundtracks and they match movies really well, their scenes. This movie, it's weird because when you take the songs out of the movie context and you're just gonna listen to it, like, yeah, they're good, but it's with this movie where you're kind of like, a lot of this feels pandering. And I'm not sure if this really fits a Tom and Jerry movie, because a lot of what makes those old cartoons is the music. Like, sure, on the surface level, it's just a cat and a mouse running around and the mouse beats the shit out of the cat with exaggerated cartoon violence. But if you go further, you'll find that a lot of what defines those cartoons is the comic timing. How they utilize everything in their setting and how they implement it into the slapstick. you know, the editing and the music. Every single one of those old cartoons are scored by a band, real instruments, you know, playing along, and it sounds great. The orchestrations for those old cartoons are wonderful. So now you watch a movie, a Tom and Jerry movie, and all they have for the music is pop songs. And it's like, like for someone who's really passionate about tackling the Tom and Jerry property, it seems like you didn't really understand it going in. It seems like you just understood the surface level of, well, as long as we just have Tom and Jerry fighting each other, that's fine. And it's like, yeah, those are fun in this movie, but a lot of what makes that's so special is the timing and how they do it, you know. There's a sophistication behind the direction of these slapstick scenes. And it seems like with these, as fun as it still is, it seems like with these you're just like, well, just have them happen. There's no real care put into any of them. Christopher Leonard does the score for this movie, and he's done some good stuff before, kind of a mixed bag as far as the stuff he's done. But for this, like, every once in a while, and I made sure to listen to the soundtrack separate to the movie, just so I could confirm that this is what I was hearing. You can hear like actual instruments every once in a while, but then it's like overpopulated with sounds that you know only a computer can make, like more modern day poppy kids movie score, dun 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 dun. And I feel like that overall summarizes how I feel about this movie, is that they understood the surface level of Tom and Jerry, and those are the things that work. But there's so much more that goes into it that they just completely neglected. I'm not even going to act like, though, that every single human character got under my nerves. You know, a lot of it is just like, yeah, the jokes aren't really working, but I don't necessarily hate you. Okay, Ken Jeong, when he's in it, he's not in it as much as I thought, but he was kind of annoying, and at one point he just makes like an impulse decision that I did not understand at all. Like, I know this is supposed to be funny and supposed to make things worse, but I don't understand. Because you're barely a character, I don't understand why you're doing this. But there's a lot of other side characters that I'm like, I'm fine with this guy, I'm fine with this girl, even as exaggerated as she is. It's just, the jokes aren't working, and I wish they did. I wish this was simplified to some degree, or I just wish that these characters had proper care with the screenwriting. And I feel bad for the Brigsby Bear guy, but I really don't think he had that much creative input in this, because a lot of it just feels like a Warner Brothers executive came in and just interfered with everything. There's a couple funny jokes, like I said, the Deadpool 2 guy who runs the hotel, he's got a couple funny lines every once in a while. Colin Jost, actually, he's got two jokes kind of back to back. The first one I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. Then he says something else that I was surprised he said in a kid's movie, a Tom and Jerry movie, and I was like, holy shit. And I cracked up at that. But a lot of the jokes are just like kind of obvious kid jokes. Spike the dog, as much as it's good to see him, there's an elongated scene where Michael Pena has to walk him, and then he takes a shit in the middle of the street. And it's like, oh, that's great. It's really weird how Michael Pena is treated as kind of like the villain, or like the character you're not supposed to like, even though he's totally justified in being mad at Chloe Grace Moretz for basically skipping the line to where he is after he's worked so hard for it. They try to make him a villain, though, so I can't really say that his character overall works, and also because his jokes aren't funny. So I wish I could say, you know what, Michael Pena's character, that's the one character that I actually kind of got behind. Because no, like, they treat him really poorly in this movie. Overall, because this movie is pandered to them, I think kids will definitely enjoy this movie. It's not like they have a whole lot of standards anyways, as far as, like, the entertainment they're watching, you know. And, you know, it's just seeing Tom and Jerry will probably make any adult smile, at least, but then they're quickly replaced by one of the other human characters, and you're just kind of like, oh, that's right. I'm going to give Tom and Jerry a C-. There's things about it that I like. This movie definitely could have worked if they had the right care put into it, but unfortunately it seemed like it was a mistake from the get-go, assembling the wrong people at the creative helm. Not just Tim Story, I mean Warner Brothers getting their executives in to meddle with everything. It seems like they got the wrong people. I know a lot of people didn't like Scoob. I did. I thought it was enjoyable, but a lot of people are saying that Tom and Jerry basically doubled down on what made Scoob so awful. And I'm just here like, you know what? Yeah, because one of the worst parts of that Scoob movie is when Shaggy and Scooby sing Shallow together randomly, and it's like, that's not very funny. And this movie's a lot of that. Maybe I need to rewatch Scoob, but I didn't really notice that many, like, modern day pop cultural references that bogged the movie down. But Tom and Jerry, there's plenty. like, that I did notice. But if you've seen Tom and Jerry, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.